Hello and welcome to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Katrina Ness and I'm joined by Ted Ings, and we are here at the Reynolds and Reynolds headquarters in Dayton, Ohio.
A great honor to be here at Reynolds and Reynolds World Headquarters. We are with Greg Uland, who is the Vice President of Marketing and the host of the Connected podcast. Greg, welcome and thanks for having us in.
Oh, yeah, thanks for coming. I'm glad you could be here for a couple of days with us.
You know, Katrina and I and our team have had a chance to spend the last 24 hours in Dayton on the campus, and really impressive at what you've assembled here and the innovation that you've put together for your retailers as well.
Yeah, we have a great team. We're lucky to come to work here every day, but the people are obviously what makes this place great. Hopefully you've experienced that while you've been visiting too.
It stands out, Greg. The people of Reynolds and Reynolds are exceptional. I know Katrina has noticed that as well. And we want to ask you a couple questions today on some of the things and the innovations that you're working on at Reynolds.
Sure.
One of them is a report that you've recently reintroduced or refreshened that's out there to help your retailers. Tell us a little bit about that and the thought process behind that.
Sure. So every couple of years, we like to set a baseline, right, and look at the industry as a whole, and then look at areas where dealers can have kind of an overstated impact on their outcomes. There's a lot that happens in our industry where dealers are not necessarily in control of the outcome. You think about the last couple of years and the profitability wave that we had, right? We had kind of this spike in profitability, and it wasn't really in control of the dealerships. They weren't necessarily dictating that. It was really a supply and demand issue. Over the last 12 months or so, we've come back down to what's hopefully a more sustainable level, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Predictability is good. And also when you look at the numbers, we're certainly higher than we were pre-pandemic. So those are all good things. But what it does do is it level sets, and it puts us in a position where we say, okay, now that we're at this sustainable level, on front end margins at least, how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to see success? So what we wanted to look at were these areas of value add for dealers, right? Where they're creating value for the consumer and ultimately creating profit for themselves. And those are traditional areas like F&I and like service. But they're very, very important, and you need to look at those things to understand how you can impact them and what the benchmarks are.
And Katrina, you studied some of these specific areas at Northwood.
Yes, for sure. At Northwood, we take different classes through the different departments of the dealership. So it's very interesting to get results from these surveys and stuff like that.
So, Greg, digging in a little bit further to that, we noticed yesterday when we went to the Innovation Center that some of the things you pointed out, the variable process, F&I in particular, fixed operations, these are areas of great opportunities for the dealer. Okay, and things have changed a lot in the last 5 years. So talk to us about why and why now and how the retailers can benefit from something like this.
Sure. So, this report that we put together, to go back to that real quick, we did it a few years ago as well, but it was pre-pandemic. So we looked at numbers and, we had a good baseline there. Well, obviously, lots changed in the last 5 years. So we needed to level set. So what we do when we put this together is we take a snapshot and we look at every dealership that comes to Reynolds from a competitive DMS. And we look at the results across 21 different performance metrics. So when we measure those things, a few things are clear. One is a baseline, and two, for these dealers, their KPIs across all those metrics increased. But the ones that stood out, gross profit stood out, but that stood out for everybody, right? So last couple of years, last 3 years, gross profits were through the roof. But the ones that really we're able to hone in on are, as an example, F&I, right? When you see, product penetrations really, really high, when you see gross profits really, really high in finance, you can dial into that and say, okay, what are the things that these dealers are doing to help them be so successful? And that's where a lot of the power lies.
And from your vantage point at the DMS, you've really got all this information in one place where really only you can access that to help the dealer with what the opportunities are and what the horizon looks like in terms of the future.
That's true. And dealers, for forever, it's been such a struggle with efficiencies, right? How do I become more efficient? That's been a constant battle for years and years and years. It's a people-heavy business, as it always will be, and it should be, right? We interact with consumers. We're retailers. It should be a people-heavy business, but how do we make those people more effective? How do we make those people more efficient? How do we help them deliver more for us, right? Deliver at a higher level for us. And we've solved that problem in a lot of different ways over the years. Just software in general. You think about it, right? And you think about the impact software has had on our industry. It's interesting when you take a step back and you look at employee count per store. I don't know if you've ever looked at this, Ted, but You go back in time, you think, and go back 2007, so kind of pre-pandemic, right? We were selling 16 million cars a year, 16.5 million cars a year, had 21,000 stores, and we had, I think the number was 53 employees per store. Okay, so a decent employment base, but it was a little over 1 million people in the industry. Fast forward a couple years, things tightened up, right? Bottom of the recession, selling a lot less cars, had a similar amount of stores, and we shrunk quite a bit when it comes to people. We went down to 46 people per store, which on the grand scheme of things is a lot, right? When you multiply that by 20,000 stores. But then you fast forward to just last year, and you look at how many people were in a store, and it's almost the highest it's ever been at 67. It's a lot of people in a store. So you say, why is that, right? And you start looking at the layout, and you think about all the different functions inside of a store that exist today that didn't exist 10, 5, even 3 years ago, right? You have a BDC, you might have two, one for sales, one for service, right? You have a digital marketing manager, you have an internet manager, you have all these functions. And in these functions in these departments, you develop these problems. Well, then we solve the problems in a silo with different pieces of software, and it creates this disconnected kind of tangled mess. And that takes people, right, to connect all that stuff, to look at the data in all the different places, to create the workflows and execute the processes. It takes a lot of people. So when you look at that, what we've done in a lot of cases is we've digitized things, right? So instead of writing things on paper, we're now typing them into a computer, but we haven't fundamentally changed the process. So, when you start to look at the bigger picture and you say, okay, how can we tie these together through software? That's when the real magic happens and the efficiency gains come, and you can start to really have an impact on profitability in those specific areas.
Katrina, I want to ask you, one of the things I noticed yesterday when we first arrived here at Reynolds is that they not only talked to us and showed us some of these specific products and services that they have for dealers, but Reynolds is also concerned about helping the dealer, okay, in utilizing these things and understanding how they work. And maybe you could speak to some of that with some of the labs that you've got at Northwood as well.
Yeah, so Reynolds really supports Northwood, which is the university I go to. And a lot of what we saw in the Innovation Center yesterday is things that we learn about in class and learn about within the school, and people from Reynolds come and teach these to us. So it was really cool to be in person at the headquarters and learn about that. And so also from these reports that we've been talking about, I'm curious, can you dive into a little bit more of the results you get and what you do with these exactly?
Sure. So going back to a couple of prime examples, F&I, service and parts. We see our dealers have a big impact on their profitability by tying all these things together. You look at F&I and we'll see profit increases anywhere between 25 and 50%, depending on where they fall on the scale. But the average median was about 27% increase. You go to the back end of the store in service and parts, and you're seeing even greater increases there. So these tools and their impacts, again, it's really identifying those areas where dealers can focus to put their efforts towards and become more efficient, and to find ways to generate that additional profitability. These are the areas where dealers are going to have the biggest impact and the most control, right? You think about the value add services, and you can kind of bucket these things. You look at what are dealers to the consumer? Certainly they sell the car, right? But again, that profitability is a little bit out of their control. So they're effectively a broker for financing, right? They align a consumer with a lender. They're a marketplace for aftermarket products, right? Where can I buy protection products and insurance products? So they do a good service there. They're effectively a regulatory agency, right? Making sure that everything is signed that needs to be, everything's presented that needs to be. They're taking care of the consumer that way. Obviously, they service and maintain vehicles. So there's a lot of value add spots, and these are the areas that we see that big increase when they truly focus on them.
Yeah, so from the consumer and the customer perspective, how do these reports and identifying them help not only the dealer, but the customer as well?
Well, I think that goes back to the intrinsic value of a dealership. Right? A dealer certainly sells a car, but they also offer a great service to the consumer, right? They're making sure that they're educated on the vehicle. They're selecting the vehicle that's right for them. They're making sure that they're able to pay for the vehicle, right? To afford it, to finance that vehicle. They're making sure that vehicle's protected. So the dealership really plays an integral role in helping the consumer get what they need, protect that investment, and then in an ongoing way, really make sure that it's the right vehicle for them.
Wonderful.
Greg, I want to have one last question today, going back to something you mentioned earlier, which is profitability. And we've been talking about that constantly. You mentioned that what we've seen in the last couple of years, may not have been normal, okay?
Right.
Because dealers have enjoyed exceptional profitability in a lot of these areas, and now it's kind of coming back to where it was, pre all these things. How does some of the tools that Reynolds provides and the training that you provide and the focus you provide to help retailers, how does that help them right now with, gaining profitability and coming back to the basics and fundamentals, which a lot of dealers, kind of slid away from the last couple of years, but now realize they need to come back to?
Sure. Well, I mean, the products are there to enable the people and to institute a process, right? And when you have people in process, you should have things to support them. So if we can make them more efficient, more effective, and help implement these things, that's where the impact happens. And as we go forward, there's a lot of fun stuff that we'll be able to do and can do today. Honestly, you saw some of it while you were here with software as a standalone. But we're really making sure that the people in the store can be as effective and efficient and profitable as possible. And that goes from software to our folks in the field. I think you've had Ryan McGinty on before, who's a Northwood alum.
Yes.
But Ryan works in the field. He's in dealerships every day. I mean, his sole job is to make sure that his team is helping dealers use the products that they have more and more and more and get the most out of them. So that's where the secret lies.
And again, not just the people here that we've seen at Reynolds headquarters in Dayton, but as you mentioned, the people that are out in the field doing those performance evaluations and working with the dealers and helping them use the tools. I think that's a big part of the secret sauce, if you will.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Greg Uland, thank you so much for your time. Katrina and I have really enjoyed what we've seen so far, as well as our team. Thank you for your hospitality. We're learning a lot about Reynolds and Reynolds today, and learning a lot about the value they bring to retailers throughout the industry. We're with Greg Uland. We're at Reynolds headquarters. Katrina and I will be right back.